What is the law of Christ, and how should we be following that today? Also, do we ever really see it? What have we been noticing online amongst believers? All that and more on today's Peck Report. Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. Today's discussion is kind of part of what could be a much longer one about the law of Moses, the law of Christ, what's all the differences there. And at some point I do want to do a video on all of that, but I'm not prepared for that just yet. There's a lot more that I have to get into, and I want to make sure that I can really dedicate some time into it. But one of the biggest problems that I've noticed, and this might be prophetic, but the love of many waxing cold. You know, we read about that in Scripture. Now, a couple of Peck reports ago, we talked about Matthew 24 and how that part of it maybe was just referring to the time of 70 AD. We talked about different areas in Matthew 24 that could be referring to 70 AD, but could also be referring to future prophecies. We got into all that, so I'm not going to rehash that. But, you know, it would seem like even if that was, it would seem like it's at least an already but not yet type of thing. Meaning that there still is a prophetic future time where the love of many will wax cold. And I think that's part of the reason I believe that we're living in like the last of the last times. Or I believe it's possible at least. Because imagine not that long ago, a couple hundred years ago, one human being wouldn't really be able to feel like the entire world was against him. You know, they might feel it locally in their own community, but the whole world, you know, like in other parts of the world, because to learn how one person in another country felt about you, for one thing, they would have to somehow know you, but then it would take months for them to send a letter to you, and then for you to know about it. But today, just think about the connectivity we have amongst each other. You can learn real fast that a lot of people all over the world just really hate you. You know, you can put up a YouTube video on any topic, you know, talking about the love of Christ, like I'm going to be talking about today. And you can find people that will disagree with you so vehemently that they will use that as their excuse to actually hate you, to practice hatred against you in mocking tones. And they will even try to use Jesus to justify these behaviors. So, from our perspective, it really seems like, you know, even if the whole world was always this hateful, we're more aware of it now, aren't we? I mean, before, and I don't even think it's the case that the world has always been this hateful, because I think people have more of an excuse. Before, a couple hundred years ago, if you were going to be hateful to people, it had to be face-to-face, right? So you have direct accountability with that person, and you always risk being ostracized from the community. If you cause too much of a problem in your community, you could be thrown in jail, you could be kicked out, you could be ostracized, banished. So there was always a greater risk. But what about today online? There's no direct, like, face-to-face interaction. You can, most of the people that are commenting online are totally anonymous. They don't use their real name even in their username. So they'll leave a YouTube comment, just drop it there, and then never say anything again. There's no accountability. And I think when you take away that accountability, you really see what's in people's hearts. So people will say that the internet isn't real life. I believe it is. I think that is more real, you know, because that's a more accurate reflection of what's truly in somebody's heart. When somebody has accountability, they're going to behave a lot more. They might act better than they really are on the inside. You know, they'll put on a show. Like, have you ever heard this? And maybe you've experienced this yourself, but you know, if you're still single, or if you're a bit younger and you're kind of dating to see, you know, try to find somebody you can marry. Have you noticed, and men and women have both noticed this with the opposite sex, but have you noticed that you'll be with somebody for, you know, a few months or so, and they seem really great at first, and then, you know, you start to see a change, you know? It's not that they're changing, it's that they're letting their guard down. They were always that way. They were just acting better towards you. And we all do this, you know, it's just part of human nature. We all do this until we get comfortable with somebody to where we can feel like we can let our true selves kind of out, you know. So it's not always deceptive. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's just a part of just human nature. You do this in friendships too. When you first meet somebody, you're probably going to be very polite to them. If you've known them for 20 years and you've been through some stuff together, you know, you might have an easier time being a little bit more, you know, loose or a little less careful in how you talk, because you know that if you're friends anyway, you know that they're not going to take offense because they know you and they know you don't mean anything by it. Whereas if you talk to somebody like that who you just met, they'd probably take offense. So that's how it used to be. But now anybody can talk to anybody at any time. And everybody's a jerk, basically. Of course, I'm speaking generally. Not everybody's a jerk, but a lot of people are. Now, the world will blame Christians for this. I don't think that's necessarily the problem. I think actually a lot of Christians don't engage online at all. So the ones that do are going to be the more brash ones that want to just be prideful and arrogant and you know, bash somebody basically because they have a disagreement. It seems like the majority of Christians are doing that because when you get online, that's pretty much all you see. But I don't think that's what's going on. I think it's actually a minority of Christians that are doing that. The majority aren't commenting at all. Like me, when I watch a video that I really like online, I usually don't comment to tell whoever the person whose video it is, unless it's a friend of mine or something. But I usually don't comment to say that I really enjoyed the video. You're doing great work, you know, God bless. I'm usually pretty silent. Now, years ago, when I was very, very immature and arrogant, I would quite often comment on people's stuff that I didn't agree with. I would go out and look for it just so I could disagree with it and show how smart I am. Of course, I wasn't thinking of it like that at the time. At the time, I was actually thinking, I'm helping these people. You know, they need to hear the truth. It's tough love. It's all a lie. That's all a lie. It was just me acting pridefully and then making excuses for it. And it's so easy to see through that. And so we see that a lot on online today. So in that sense, because it's given people sort of an excuse, it's taken away accountability, I do believe that we're seeing love waxing cold. I do believe that we're seeing more hate in the world and less love because of the internet. It's a lot easier to hate somebody than it is to love them. To truly love somebody, you got to know them. You know, you have to have trust. You have to have experiences to know if this is somebody that's compatible with you, even in just a friendship. To hate somebody, you don't need to know anything about them. You don't need to have had any previous interactions with them at all. And this is just human nature. It's easy to hate somebody. Now, that's human nature that's wrong and sinful. But that's what we see online, and we see it disguised. There are some Christians that will try and say that, well, this is good. You know, this is tough love. This is how we're supposed to be. It's okay to mock people sometimes. No, it is not. And we're going to get into why, especially with Christians. You shouldn't mock the world either. You shouldn't mock non-believers because we should want to bring them into the faith, and you're not going to mock them into it. You know, it's not going to work. You're not going to bully them into it. We should want to invite them into the faith, but especially with fellow believers, we're supposed to be like brothers and sisters. Now, I know it's a common trend among brothers and sisters in real familial relationships to bicker and fight, but that's still wrong. You know, brothers and sisters should not be treating each other that way. I hold a higher standard for my kids when they don't get along with one another than if they don't get along with a classmate or something. Like, for example, one of my kids just started school again, and she has a classmate who is kind of being a little bit of a bully, a little bit. And so to her, I told her, well, you got to stand up for yourself. You know, you can't let somebody push you around. If it's something you can handle on your own, handle it. But, you know, you should go tell a teacher. You know, she's still really young, so this isn't like, you know, 17-year-olds and, you know, me trying to teach self-defense. You know, it's not to that point. These are just little kids. So I'm like, you know, you should probably go tell a teacher, tell them what's going on. But you definitely shouldn't put up with that, you know. Now, that's some classmate. That's a kid that's not mine. That's a totally different circumstance than when two of my kids bicker or fight. Then it's a different thing. Then it's not like, well, don't be put. It's no, you two absolutely have to get along. You do not get to treat each other this way. You know, you're going to be all you have when your mom and I pass from this world. You know, which you would think is like heavy stuff to put on a kid, but it's really not. They get it to the point of their understanding that they can get it. But it's a different deal. So I think it's the same with us Christians. God wants us to get along. Now, we should be praying for people on the outside, unbelievers. We should be trying to minister, you know, outreach, that kind of stuff. But we're not required to get along with them in the way that we're required to get along with other Christians. Because other Christians are our brothers and sisters. These are our family. These are people that we will be spending eternity with. Never ending, right? We're family. We have to get along. And it's to the point that Scripture even says if you hate your brother, you don't have the love of God. You just don't. So that's a big deal. God is so strict about this and is so strong about this that you can't even love God if you don't love your brother. So we need to take that extremely seriously. If you're doing or posting anything that could even be remotely could be remotely construed as being unloving to your brother, don't do it. And that's something that you and God have to you have to work out with God. God will convict your heart if you ask him to. And we should all be asking that. I think a lot of times we as Christians don't ask for correction or conviction as much as we should. We should always be asking for that. If there's something in our heart that we're being deceived by, and that's the thing about deception, you don't know you're being deceived, right? Then we need God to reveal that to us. And I'm telling you, if you are talking to other Christians online in a mocking tone, you are not being loving towards them. And I don't care what excuse you try to bring up. You cannot use Jesus and the Pharisees. Pharisees were not Jesus's brother, right? Pharisees were the outsider, and you're not Jesus. You're not the judge of the world the way that Jesus is. Jesus is fully within his rights to judge the Pharisees and say whatever he wants. And the Pharisees, they weren't Christians anyway. They weren't believers. So we're talking about the judge of all creation here against non-believers. We're not talking about two Christian brothers fighting on Facebook. So you can't use that as your excuse on why you're gonna post nasty stuff to people who disagree with you. So this gets into the law of Christ. And what is the law of Christ? Well, I believe it's love. It is that. We've got to love God and love each other. I think that's the law of Christ. And you can actually sum up the Ten Commandments in that. You can sum up the law of Moses in that. You can sum up all of that. And again, I'm not going to get too much into the law of Moses stuff because I want to probably do a few different videos on that at some point when I'm ready for it. But you can sum up every law, every commandment is a reflection of one of those two things. And Jesus takes this so strongly that okay, so even the commandment of do not murder. Well, what is that a reflection of? Hate. You can't hate your brother. You're not allowed. If you're going to follow Christ, you cannot do that. Because you got to remember, you're a sinner too. If you think you usually when we hate, actually probably always, when we hate somebody, it's a reflection of our own pride. Now, of course, there are extreme circumstances. If somebody is responsible for your child's death or something like that, there's extreme circumstances. Of course, I would still say I can't imagine the level of pain and anger in that circumstance, but we have to work with God and try to find forgiveness through that. We still have to. It's hard, and I believe that God understands that, but that's not the same as somebody disagreeing with you on Facebook. And so, other people would say something like that. So where do we get this idea of the law of Christ? I want to look at a couple of passages today on this idea. And while we're going through this, I want to look at, I want us to think about the world that we live in now, and is there more hate? Is there less love in the world? And I believe it's definitely expressed more. I'll say that. I don't know if there is actually more hate, but I believe that the hatred that is there is expressed a lot more than it even could have been, even a couple hundred years ago, let alone 2,000 years ago, because they just didn't have the technology. You can hate anybody in the world now, with no accountability. So let's think about that and how important our role is as Christians, how important it is for us to get this love thing right in this dark and hateful world that we live in, and how powerful of a tool that can be. Like how powerful of a witnessing tool just loving somebody can be. Because most people have never really experienced it. They may think they have, but have they really? I mean, the love that this world has to offer is still pretty bleak. So I want to take a look at some of this. So let's look at John 13. Let's go 31 through 35. When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and glorify him at once. Little children, yet a little while I am with you. You will seek me, and just as I said to the Jews, so now I also say to you, where I'm going, you cannot come. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another." Now, I want to pause there. Note, he did not say just as I have loved the Pharisees. He didn't say just as I have loved the Romans, He's saying just as I've loved you. So, and why I bring that up, now, of course, that extends to Gentile believers and stuff too. But why I bring that up is because you cannot use the excuse, well, Jesus said this or that to the Pharisees. Jesus tipped over tables. That's not what he's talking about here, is he? Just as I have loved you, believers. We're talking about our relationship to other believers. The Pharisees weren't believers. Clearly, they crucified Christ. Well, technically the Romans did, but the Pharisees certainly had their hand in it. But so a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. Jesus died for us. Did Jesus whip the apostles? Did Jesus insult, constantly berating the apostles? There were a couple of choice words that he had, but look at the love he had for him. How did he? And look, when he was doing that, that was how he corrected the apostles, right? That was how he corrected his disciples. When he told Peter, "Get behind me, Satan," he was correcting Peter. He was doing that out of love, but we also have to remember Jesus is an elevated place in our lives that other believers are not in. We don't elevate brothers above other brothers. We don't do that. Jesus is in that position where he can correct Peter, whereas it would be inappropriate for you to bash another believer on Facebook because they believe in a pre-trib rapture or something. And they're just two totally different things. So those parallels don't work. But why now? He says in verse 35, "By this all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another." So it's not just love, generally, love for one another. The way that we love one another as Christians is how all people will know that we are truly of Jesus. Why are there so many unbelievers? What's one of the biggest criticisms that atheists have against Christians? that we're petty, we fight with one. Now, some of that is blown up. Some of that's just not true. A lot of that is, an atheist found one reason to feel slighted against when it really wasn't, and they made a big deal about it, and now they just hate Christians forever because they're looking for an excuse. That happens really quite often. So I'm not laying this all at the feet of the church, right? Many of you are doing your best and are really trying to love one another, and we're all human, we're all going to sin, we're all going to mess up. But at the same time, we are going, if our goal is to evangelize people, bring people into Christianity, save souls, and that should be, that's the Great Commission, right? Jesus literally died for this cause, so we can be saved. That's how seriously he takes this. So if we're going to take that seriously, how do people know that we are of Jesus? How do people know that we're his? By the love we have for one another. So if we don't have love for one another, we aren't Jesus' disciples. We're disciples of the world at that point. So whenever you post, I don't care what excuse you can come up with, when you post something, put the excuses aside. Just honestly, with Jesus leading you, think, am I reflecting Christ or am I reflecting the world? Because I'll tell you, from an outsider's perspective, when I read those comments, I see no difference between Christians bashing people and the world bashing people. It looks and sounds exactly the same. It's a reflection of the world. So we don't get to do that to one another. Now, I know most people listening to this aren't engaging in that, and good. The thing that we got to get used to, though, is disassociating ourselves from people who are doing that and are not willing to accept any kind of rebuke or reproof, or and when we judge each other, when we judge other Christians, it's supposed to be through love. It's supposed to be because we love that person, not because we love ourselves so much that we want to be right. And that's 99% of what you see online. But it should be because we love that person and we want to see them do well. And that's how you know how to spot cultish behavior. So, there's a lot of like new Christian movements, right? Seems like every week a new one's being developed. Well, the way you know that it's just a reflection of the world, it's a cult basically, the way that you know is, how do they treat people that disagree with them? Because if they really believed that they had the truth, they have the truth, and this is so important that you accept it, and it's not a pride thing. It's because, if they believe that they have the truth and they want to share it with you, it would be done out of compassion, out of love, out of genuine concern for you. But what do you see with these movements? All of them, basically. What do you see? You see bashing, you see hatred, you say things, you see things being said like, if you don't believe X, Y, and Z, you don't really love God. You don't even believe in the Bible. I had people tell me that because I didn't agree with them on the shape of the earth, or because I didn't agree with them on how exactly to view the Mosaic Law, or I didn't agree with them about that it's okay to celebrate Christmas, or that that passage in Jeremiah that's always quoted at Christmas is not talking about a Christmas tree. I've had people tell me that I hate God because of that. Okay, that's how I know that they're entering into cultish behavior, because they don't even believe enough in their own truth, quote. If they really did, and they believed that I was in serious spiritual danger, where's the love and compassion, right? When I see somebody who I know is falling into some behavior that could potentially cause them to like not be saved, that's like a reflection that they're rejecting Jesus, man, I'm genuinely worried for that person. I pray for them, even if they're a jerk to me, and a lot of times they are. I don't have anger towards them. I have worry. I have like fear, if anything. I'm worried. I don't want to see them go to hell. I don't care at that point if they're being insulting towards me. I want them to accept Jesus, and I want them to get away from this behavior that's leading themselves and others astray. So you see like a lot of these atheist ministries, these people that are actively going out and making atheists, approaching Christians and trying to get convince them to deny their faith, and I see that, and it's like, man, I really worry about you, because what is God going to say when you stand before him? I'd so much rather you come to repentance and not lead people into the gates of hell, because you're going to be held responsible for that. We serve a totally righteous God. He's going to judge that. And that worries me. That I don't want to see anybody have to spend an eternity in hell because they're deceived and they're spreading that deception around willingly. They're doing it even willingly, actively trying to get people to deny their faith. So I don't hate them. I hate what they're doing, but that's a big difference. And that's unbelievers. So when it comes to believers on non-salvational issues, especially, we should not have any hate for those who disagree with us. It's fine to disagree. We're all fallible. We're all trying to do the best we can. But the biggest problem that I see is the lack of unity, right? Because with love will come unity, fellowship, all this good stuff that if the world sees that in us, they would say, man, I'd love that. My family hates me. My family, I've just been stabbed in the back time and time again. This world is such a dark, evil place. And unbelievers know this. They know that. That's why a lot of them fall into nihilism. That's why they fall into, just nothing matters then. It wouldn't take much. We just need to show them an example of what true love is. And true love is when we disagree, we still love each other. We're family. If the world sees that, they'll know that we're Jesus' disciples, and then we can talk to them about Jesus, because they can say, why are you like this? And then we can say, you know what? It's not me, and it's not him. Normally, if we weren't Christians, if we weren't serving Christ, we would be at each other's throat, but it's Jesus working through us. Jesus has given us so much freedom that even though we disagree, we still love each other. And, that's what it's all about. That is such a powerful witness, and we're missing it. We're missing it because we want to score points against people online. I want to talk about Galatians 6, because that speaks about the law of Christ as well. I'll just get into it briefly. Galatians 6:2, bear one another's burdens, so fulfill the law of Christ. So we're under the law of Christ, and when you love somebody, you bear their burdens, even unto death. No greater love is this than a man who would sacrifice his life for his friend or his brother, or however it's worded. That's like a Peck paraphrase, but we bear each other's burdens. Now, when you're sarcastic to somebody online, are you bearing their burden? Even if you think they're in the wrong, even if you think they're being ignorant and stupid, would you consider that stupidity or that ignorance as a burden? Well, if you really believe that they're in error in something they're believing, if you really think that would be a burden to them, right? So help them bear that. Guide them out of it through love. But remember, you could be wrong. See, it's like the less important the issue is, the more certain Christians want to fight about it. So we got to understand, and I'm going to say for right now, this doesn't matter what you believe about the law of Moses. Whether you think we should follow the law or not, it doesn't matter, because whatever side of the coin you are on that, we are to fulfill the law of Christ. And that does have to do with the commandment of loving one another. So we could even take the whole law thing as an example. Actually, there's this is in Romans, but one person says you should follow the Sabbath, and one says every day is the Sabbath, or every day I honor Christ. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but should those two people be fighting against each other? No, love each other anyway. It says each do to the glory of God. So the guy that wants to do the Sabbath, do the Sabbath. The guy that wants to make every day the Sabbath and honor God every day and esteem him all the same, fine. Both do it to the glory of God, and we can rejoice together as brothers. Now, that doesn't mean we can't talk about it. We can have discussions. Oh, you're doing that. Why? That's interesting. I remember a really, really good friend of mine that we just had on the show, Dr. Michael Lake. I went out to dinner with him one time, and he ordered a steak well done. And to me, that was like, oh, why even order a steak at that point? You know, you're ruining it. And so, but I just politely asked, you know, why'd you get it well done? Is that like an Old Testament thing, or is that just your preference? And he said it was. He wanted to make sure all the blood was out of the meat. Now, I learned later, actually, the red stuff in steak isn't blood. It's, I forget what it is. It's a type of enzyme. It's red, it looks like, but it's not actually blood. So, but I haven't told Dr. Lake that because it's really not that important to me that he doesn't eat well-done steak. He can eat well-done steak if he wants. I don't care. It's totally fine. You know, there's zero importance on it. And though that's something that he and I kind of disagree on, because medium rare for me. But he and I disagree on that because I ordered a medium rare steak, but I did it because I knew that he wasn't going to have a problem with it. If I thought that he would have an issue with it or it would cause him to like stumble in some way, I would have just got mine well done and I would have sucked it up and did it, and we wouldn't have fought about it. And you know, I would have been fine doing that. As a courtesy to him, and also because I respect him and look up to him, and I love him as a brother in Christ. So we should be like that with each other. I don't care about being right against him, you know, on that issue, nor does he me. He very well could be right on that thing. I don't know what the biblical standard for blood is. You know, sometimes like in biblical classification, bats are birds because they fly. Even some insects are birds. That's just biblical classification. So that red enzyme in the steak, according to biblical classification, could that be considered blood? I don't know. I haven't really looked into it that much. And you know, but I feel like in my life there have been things that God has wanted me to focus on first before getting to something like that, and I'll just leave that there. But how ridiculous would it be? Of all the benefits that Dr. Michael Lake and I have been able to share from our friendship together, just the fellowship and just all the throughout the years, we've had just such good times together, interviewing each other and working on projects together, doing conferences and just amazing, just good fellowship, just fellowship. You know, this amazing brother in Christ. Had I made a big deal about that steak thing, I could have ruined it just because of that, just because I wanted to be right. How many relationships have been prematurely ruined because somebody was a jerk online and they couldn't see past a slight difference that's not even salvational anyway? But even if it was a matter of salvation, it would not be a reason to be hateful or be a jerk. It would be all the more reason to be loving and say, man, I'm really worried about you because I want to see you in eternity with me. I don't want to see you judged for this. So we have to keep that in mind, that perspective. And I think that's important. Okay, so for members, hang on the line. We're going to get into some Galatians and talk a little bit more about that. For everybody else, it would greatly help this ministry if you have been fed tonight in some way. Please consider becoming a member at dailyrenegade.com. You'll get the rest of this Peck Report, and you'll get much, much more. We have a lot of shows. We got a lot of cool stuff for you there. That's in the members only section. Dailyrenegade.com. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year. And your membership will be a great blessing to this ministry, not just because of the finances that you're contributing, but because you're bringing yourself, because you're bringing another brother or sister to the rest of us that we can fellowship with, and we would love to have you in fellowship with you. So, you know, in the members only sections, we've got places for people to talk, and comment sections and forums, and you know, we got lots of cool stuff, and we're building more as time goes on, but that's only possible through these memberships. We also support other ministries as well, which you can get information on at dailyrenegade.com. But again, that is $10 a month or $100 a year. If you get the $100 a year, you get 2 months for free. So that's a great deal. You only got to pay for it once. You don't have to think about it again. So do that if you can. All right, everybody viewing for free, thank you so much for joining. Members, hang on the line. Everybody else, love you all. Take care and God bless.